All right, how many of you have even heard of the Dutch settlement? Who were the settlers in the Dutch settlement? Wrong! That's what I was fishing for. They were Europeans, but there were a lot of Germans, Deutsch, who the Polk County people thought were Dutch. And there were a Frenchman, Napoleon Guerin was a Frenchman, but Frederick Littner was, I think he was a German too. Littner.
Was Becker?
Beckler was a German. And their descendants are still around here. The Guerins in Etowah are descendants of the Guerins, I believe. All my neighbors for decades have been Littners. In fact, I helped one of them understand the connection for grandpa, actually. He was named Napoleon. And she put that on Facebook. She said, "This is my grandpa's picture." Carol Webb, her husband was Vernon, the pastor up at Maple Springs, and Carol died last year. But she'd put on Facebook a picture of her grandpa. She said his name's Polly Littner. But she said his name was Napoleon, but everybody called him Polly. And I saw that. I said, "Do you know where that name came from, Napoleon?" And Carol says, "Well, I know about Napoleon Bonaparte, but he was French. We're Germans." And I said, "Yes, but the manager of the Dutch settlement was Napoleon Guerin, and I'll guarantee you that your grandpa or great-grandpa, whichever one it was, his daddy knew him." And I said, "That's where that name came from, I'll guarantee you." We'll talk about how this happened. Get the first frame here, I'll show you. Y'all know where it's at?
No.
Nobody. It's south of the river, south of Parksville Lake. When you're riding Silco Trail, if you park there at that gate just north of Silco Campground where everybody does, it's across that ridge over on Dutch Creek, the headwaters of Dutch Creek.
I don't know where that is. I don't know where Parksville.
You don't know where Parksville is? Parksville Lake. I think I made 4 trips in there in the last few years, and here's like the 3 routes. This is Thurman Parishes, and this is Pace Gap. Y'all know where Pace Gap is?
No.
Where we opened the gate to go in the Falls Branch Road, that's Pace Gap. And that's one way in. It's about a mile or so down here to where the Dutch fields are. The best way in is over here off 221. This is the gate before you get over to Pace Gap. That's the way they go in every year with the tractors to mow the Dutch fields that are still there. This is the other road we're going to talk about here in just a minute on video. This is Christian Dietz's original road. I had to ask everybody that I knew how to find it. Thurman helped me. Linda helped me. Where are you, Linda?
We jeeped it in the 60s.
Okay, I didn't know. Have you ever ridden your horse down it? A lot of people rode horses through and went into the Dutch fields. It was a jeep road up into the 60s. And the rest of you probably know where it's at. If you park at the Chable Gate, where we was talking about north of Silco Campground, and y'all remember where the car was burned and turned upside down in the creek this time last year around December? If you cross the creek right there, there's a big field. If you go on the other side of that field, up on there was a house up until about 30s or 40s where Kerbos lived. But there's a road that goes up by that house, and if you just keep going, it goes up there and winds out to the end of the ridge, comes back around and goes all the way over into Dutch Creek. And that road was built around 1840, because by the time the 1830s, 40s came around, the state of Tennessee was selling all this property. And they sold off the bottomlands of the river first. It was the most expensive, and everybody wanted the farmland. And then after they sold all that, they cut the price in about half, and they sold stuff that was a little less than the good bottom farmland. And the last thing is they had all this mountain land, and they couldn't get rid of it. So they sold it, and it went really cheap. Guess how much in 1840 you could buy an acre of our Cherokee National Forest land for? 3 cents. 3 cents an acre. So what happened is people who had a little bit of money up north would buy tens of thousands of acres for an investment. A man named Christian Dietz from New York, he came down here and he built this road They already had a road probably up Silco Creek that we ride today, the bottom part down there. But from Silco Creek, he built this road that went all the way through Pace Gap, and it went on down down Pace Branch to Baker's Creek, Big Creek. Right there where we park at the trailhead today to maintain Baker Creek Trail, or Big Creek Trail, he had a house, a 2-story house, which Thurman Parrish in his book says that when he went to work for the Forest Service in 1962, the year I was born, that his ranger had been there since they started it, like 1930 or something, this south end. And he said he remembered the ruins of that house was still there. It was right there about the trailhead on the creek bank. Somebody else, Dietz only lived in it for about a year or two, and he went back to New York. After he built this road, that's amazing to me. Now, he had to have a crew, but he didn't have bulldozers or equipment. But they built that road all the way through there. Later, Andy Pace moved into that house, which is probably where then Pace Branch, Pace Gap got its name from. But this road was already here by the time the Dutch settlers, the Europeans, came in like 1846. That's why they got over in there where you look at it today and think, why did they move way back in there? Well, there's already a road back into there. And the other thing to keep in mind is Silco was not as secluded then as it is now. There was a good road from Cleveland to where the intersection of 30 and 64 is today, and a good ford in the river right there, and you just forded the river and you went right up Silco Creek on our horse trail today. And by the 1840s, there was already at least 10 houses up through there where we ride. So it wasn't all that secluded, but they went on the other side of the ridge because they didn't speak English. They were isolated. The investor by the name of Edwin Bayer from Brooklyn, New York, and his wife Adele, I'm going to meet their sister-in-law, came down here to visit after they'd been there a few years, and she left a diary where we get all this information from, Rosine Parmenter. But Edwin Bayer had invested, he bought 126,000 acres, which is basically everything that's the south zone of the Cherokee National Forest now. There's another guy up around Delano, bought a big plot like that by the name of Wetmore. Community's still up there, Wetmore. And why were they investing in this stuff? Today we're going to buy land, if you're young, it's an investment and you sit on it a few decades and you're going to make money on it. But what they were looking for, I believe, not timber, not the 1840s, gold. Because until 1849 Sutter's Mill, most of the gold in the U.S. Mint came from Coker Creek, Tennessee, and Dahlonega, Georgia. So Edwin Bayer bought all this, and he handpicked these people, these European people, the Becklers and all of them, to come in here. And I think what he wanted them to be, they had to live, they had to farm and build their houses and all that stuff, but I think they were also probably, and Thurman, I got this from Thurman's book, that he thinks they were also scouting around, looking for ore and everything. And they never found it, needless to say, but...
So did he sell the property to them, or were they just...
No, he owned the property, I believe, at first, every bit of it. They were his community. And it's interesting to me, they came in here, they're from France and Italy and Germany, and they didn't speak the same language, and they lived back there together. They were also all Roman Catholics out here in the middle of the mountains in East Tennessee. They had a priest come in like once a year and have services. But Frederick Littner spoke 7 different languages, so he could communicate between the neighbors and translate. Including, I guess, English was one, because all the community on the other side of the ridge were just mountain hillbilly people, just our ancestors. But that amazed me. He spoke 7 different languages. And also they were handpicked because every one of them had a skill. You had somebody could make furniture, somebody that could, do blacksmith, and somebody could do this. They planted vineyards, they made wine. They had elaborate croquet courses back in there. That's what they like to do, I guess. That was their entertainment. But we went in here. I've got to do this quick because I don't want to talk too much because we've got the videos. But Ken and I went in the first trip I went we parked at Pace Gap and we walked down in here to around the Beckler field. We didn't know what we was doing at that time. We got out and it just went through the hollers and stuff. What I did learn is I think they probably farmed all those little feeder streams that were coming into Dutch Creek, because if you walk up them, they're all flat. I mean, just as flat as it can be back in there. And they had to have quite a bit of stuff to farm in there. The second time we went in, we took Susan with us last December 29th. You're going to see that in a minute. And we went in this way. It's much better to go in this way. And we were looking for the gear. We wanted to find the gear and spring, which had been lost since 1992, I believe. And we did find it. We're going to see it on the video. It's the most exciting thing I've done in these weekly word videos. I mean, seriously, we've been doing it for 5.5 years, and Ken and I have always loved that Oak Island. You know, it's season 13 coming up here. You know, they never find it. You know, but we found the gear and spring, like we found the treasure. You know, so. It's really hard to find too, but we took Susan, we went in here and we went down to the gearing place and we didn't know where it was. And actually we walked through it that day. Susan pointed out, said, here's some yucca plants and there's some piles of rocks and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But the thing I learned about the Dutch settlement is I was used to seeing the old houses and stuff on rocky flats and Basin Branch where you still had some stones and walls and foundation. But those are like 100-year-old ruins. These are getting closer to 200-year-old ruins. So it's really hard to even know what you're looking at when you see them. The Beckler place was still a standing cabin until about the 40s or so, and the Forest Service dozed it down. But today, do you know where the Beckler place is? The Beckler house, it's in the middle of one of the Dutch fields. Yeah, most people, they could sit there and eat lunch and wouldn't realize they're in an old house, but the Forest Service actually used to use it to stay in when they were working on that end of the district up there. But Susan and Ken and I, we went through the place, the home site that day and didn't even realize it. And instead of taking a cut across the mountain, we'd left one truck, like Ken's truck, at the Chable Gate, and we'd left out of this other gate. When we got down to the gearing place, instead of taking the Deeps Road on out of here, we followed Dutch Creek. I don't recommend anybody ever do that, ever. It was like hands and knees, and we can't go anymore. We crawl up this mountain, we come back down, it's hands and knees. We finally crawled one that was almost vertical. I was behind her. I mean, I was scared somebody's going to slip, and it's like hundreds of feet back down to Dutch Creek. She got a hold of a place there where she could get out on her cell phone. Once she texted her mom, let her know where she was at. And she's like, she was ready, like, we can stay all night now. We didn't have anything to stay all night with, but she was so tired, she was just ready to stay all night. We got out after dark. You know, we left Food City at Ocoee at 9 that morning. We got out after dark. That's the night we found the car in the creek, by the way, on the way back out of there.
So y'all came out down on...
We came out on the horse trail. We're at the confluence of Dutch Creek, yep. Which in later years there was a post office and a grist mill right there, like 1880s. But we went back the next time. I talked to Thurman again, and we went back in the Deeps Road, park at the Chable Gate, and cross where the car was in the creek, and we followed that. It's just like 1.5 miles over there. So I got a video on the Deeps Road here. It's about 10, 15 minutes or something. This is the Garrett. See, people go looking for them places and they don't find them. I mean, unless you had somebody like Thurman to help me, you could sit there and like this. I wouldn't know that was a house. It's just the chimney. But it was at one time, according to Rosine's diary, 3-bedroom house, full porch on the front. Big dining room, a big open area dining room, I guess, in between the 3 bedrooms. Behind the house, you can see still the dugout flat space on a knoll. Just about 15 feet behind the house was the kitchen, which probably had a roof in between it. They called that a dog trot back then. It's pretty smart. You could do your cooking and not get your house hot in the summertime, you know. So, but you could see all that. But anyhow, this is the next one, the video.
Yeah, but there's the yucca plants too.
The yucca plants that Susan said, here's the house first time we went. I'm like, oh no. But when you see yucca plants, that's usually a good giveaway out there's a home place around.
Yucca
Everybody used to plant yucca plants. You'll see them along the trails and stuff.
All the
And you
time.
can't kill them.
Yeah, they're still there.
I hope they weave baskets with them.
They did something with them. Is video next?
Well, that was the.
Well, that's also at the house, and this is unusual. That's a giant black walnut tree right at about where the edge of the porch would have been. What else we got? Video, okay. Hey, welcome back to the Weekly Word, Outdoor Adventures. It's 2 weeks later since we went on our Dutch settlement adventure, and it was an adventure, wasn't it, Ken?
Yeah, it was a rough one.
We went off kind of half-cocked. We were trying to follow the old Christian Dietz road through the Dutch settlement from the Pace Gap end, and we took a wrong turn. We got down to the Guerin place, and we were supposed to cross the creek and come out over here where we'd left the other vehicle at the gate just north of Silco Campground. But we didn't cross the creek, and we ended up going down the Dutch Creek Gorge, and I don't recommend doing that again, do you?
No, I'm not going to do it again.
It was dark when we got out over here, and it was a rough day. So we've come back for the second day, and nice day. It's supposed to get up about 60 degrees here, and we're going to go down here and try to find the other end of the Dietz Road and follow it into the Guerin place. And I brought a map today, and you brought what, a GPS?
GPS and a topo map on the phone.
So maybe we won't get lost today. Come on, let's go on this adventure here. Well, we've made it to our destination, Ken.
Yeah, we have. Into the Guerin place.
Or maybe we just made half our destination, because we got to turn around now and make the same trip back out to the Silco gate where our truck is.
Yeah.
How many miles do you think we've walked to get in here fall on the old road?
Maybe a mile and a half or so.
Is that all? It seemed like 10.
It felt longer.
We came in here where we lost the trail last week on our Dutch settlement video, and we've joined back up with it. We followed an old road that was built in 1840 by a man named Christian Dietz, D-I-E-T-Z-C-H. He came down here from New York. He'd speculated and bought land, I guess, and he built him a home over on Big Creek. And then he built a road in here off the Silco Road. He came through here, up through what's today known as the Dutch Fields, and through Pace Gap, down Pace Branch, over on Big Creek where his home was. They said he was only here for 3 years. It's amazing he built a home, and I'm sure he had a pretty good crew helping him build this road. But that's the reason that the Dutch settlement is back in here. They already had a good road coming in here in 1846, and Mr. Dietz had already left. He built the road and went back to New York. He decided he didn't like these Tennessee mountains too much. But we followed his old road in here, and most places in it, it's had 20th century dozers put in where they're getting timber out, but some places you can still actually see the old original road that's just a big rounded rut in the ground now that's, what is that, 185 years ago? That was a long time back. But in 1846, Mr. Guerin was the manager, so to speak, of the Dutch settlement, and his home was a half mile below the rest of the homes up in the Dutch fields, other than some new settlers' homes they put down here. And I think we're sitting at the remnants of the Guerin place. It's just basically 2 rock piles left here, and somebody told me who knows that there were still people living here into the 1920s. There's not much to show for it anymore. You got to really look. The home would have been looking straight across Dutch Creek at the old road coming across the creek, and the first thing anybody would have seen coming to the Dutch settlement is they would have got right here and they'd seen the Guerin place. And then they'd hung a right and went a half mile on up into the Dutch fields. What is still here is lots of yucca plants growing around here. A very interesting tree that we're going to try to find out what it is. We made some pictures of the leaves we picked up off the ground underneath it, and some blooming berries of some kind. as we're videoing today, what is this, December the 30th? You're checking.
30th, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost New Year's, and it's just beautiful. What color is that, Ken? I'll put you on the spot.
Looks red.
Red, pink.
berries,
I don't know, but it's a beautiful color, and there's lots of them. And I've never noticed them anywhere else in our mountains. I'm wondering if that's something that was brought in here a long time ago in the 1800s or so. But it's kind of hard to follow that road in places. We was told they're still riding Jeeps on part of it until the 60s, wasn't we? But that's been, what, 60 years ago or so? So still a lot of trees fell in 60 years. But we made it in here, and we were able to follow the road that somebody built in 1840. It's kind of hard to follow a road somebody built 185 years ago. But, you know, there's a road that was built over 2,000 years ago. And it's a road to heaven that Jesus built. And you can still follow that road, but it's a lot easier to find because you can still follow Jesus. He's still alive. And you can grab the hem of his garment, so to speak, and just follow the Lord closely, and you'll find your way to heaven on that road. And it's easier to follow than this thing down here. But we're going to explore around a little bit more, see if we can find the old Gearing Spring. And then we're going to head back to Silco and the truck and get on back to the home. Thanks for joining us on this Weekly Word Outdoor Adventure. See you next week, Lord willing.
Just following this road right here, we should come out at the Gearing place.
Yes.
Yep, I think so. We're just not that far away from what you're talking about as the crow flies.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about going up that way and dropping down. If we go up this way and drop down, we're going to hit the road that we walked in on.
Last week.
Last week.
Oh,
yeah.
that'd be bad.
Yeah.
That'd be bad. That'd be bad. Yep. All right, after we went to the Gearing place, Linda, y'all remember when you used to drive it where you forded Dutch Creek when you come? Did you know where the Gearing place was?
I guess we probably did.
Just as soon as you ford Dutch Creek, you would have been looking at the house, the front porch. And I've read in some of Thurman's stuff that they actually put up a gate there back in the 1840s when the settlement was in there, because you know how Polk County mountain people was. They was curious and nosy. They wanted to see what them people was doing up there. So you had to come right by the manager's house with a gate to get up the other half mile up in there. It's still not a bad walk from Silco Creek over in there. If you come in the way I showed you to get to the Gearing place, once you get down to the Dutch fields and cross the Dutch Creek there, that's on the creek bank. As soon as you hit the Dietz's Road, you go left, and it's roado about this deep for the next half mile down to the Gearing place. After we found the Gearing place, I wanted to find the spring, because y'all know who Thurman Parrish is. He worked for the Forest Service for decades, and then he wrote at least 3 books called The Old Home Place. I borrowed Linda's first time I read that 20 years ago, I guess. And then he came out with one called Back to the Mountains, and then Mountain Memories, I think. And it's about the old folk stuff like this in their Cherokee National Forest, Reliance and Silco areas and stuff. People lived there back in 100 years ago. But Thurman had found that spring because somebody a generation in front of him, J. Brad Kimbrough, saw his grave over at Shiloh Baptist here a while back. He had told Thurman that he found that spring. And he told Thurman about it, and Thurman said he found, I believe, in 92, and he was back in there in 2011, and he wrote in his book, he said that the hogs had destroyed it. But I got to communicating with Thurman about it, and he's way up in his 80s now, but he emails. But I'll read you this first paragraph that he sent me back. He had slept on it, and he said, I believe I just didn't look in the right place. He said, see if I can read this. I went back, Thurman said, with Marion Presswood, Polk County historian, in 2011. They all seemed in a hurry, and I could not quickly relocate the spring. I thought at the time that it might have been destroyed by hogs, but thinking later, I was sure I just failed to find it. It's extremely difficult to find. There's no sign of a stream at the spring. It's hidden under a flat slate stone about 2 foot by 2 foot, and it's about 18 feet down to, or 18 inches down to the water level. The stone's covered with leaves and will take a lot of searching. After lifting the stone, the rocked up spring is clearly visible. The water flow from the spring may have changed over the years, but I don't think it ever had a stream coming in. The source was underground. There's now no water above ground. There's now no above ground stream visible going out. So don't base your search on seeing water. I think it may have once had natural wood pipe leading out of the bottom with a spout. That's what I thought too, the way it was. It had a spout with water coming out to catch water. Or they may have just dipped it. It now has an underground route back to the creek. Here's his directions in his mind after he'd slept on it for years. From the Gearing house, it's across the creek and well to the right of the ford in the flat area. I first found it from a description by J. Brad Kimbrough. It took hours, but I didn't give up because Brad had never led me wrong. So I knew it was there. When you know something's there, you don't cease to look. I've given you about the same description that he gave me, so maybe you'll find it. I took a photo of the spring with the rock lifted out, but it's become lost or misplaced. I'd love to have a photo if you find it. And I got him one. I just was researching this week to getting ready for this, and I noticed he had put it on that Old Town Cleveland. He did give me credit for the photo and said I put it back just like I found it. I remember it near the center of the flat area, maybe right center on a very slight slope. Good luck, it is there. And I had this from Thurman. And Edward Bear, the guy who owned the settlement, they called it Bear Settlement, by the way. The people in Silco called it the Dutch settlement, you know. You know what they call the people in Silco? Americans. Yeah, they referred to them as the Americans. So Edward Bear in 1852, 5 or 6 years after the settlement's been going on, he wants to come and see his settlement. He's never been to the land, all this 126,000 acres that he bought. So he and his wife Adele and her sister Rosine Parmenter, they get on a boat in New York, go to Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia, they get on a train and take the train to Cleveland, Tennessee, where they spent the night in Myra Inman's boarding house, Inman Street. That's a really good book. I recommend it. I got it off Amazon a few years. The Diary of Myra Inman. It was about during this is all going on in the Civil War when she writes her diary. But they stayed at her boarding house that night. They got up at 7. They left at 7:30 a.m. with horses and buggy, and they made it to the Dutch settlement by 9 p.m. that night. They rode the buggy all the way up the good road that took them to the intersection of today's 30 and 64. They forded the river there. Rosine writes, the water came into the back of the buggy. They had stopped for lunch at a farmhouse that served lunch, I guess, somewhere over there around Parksville Dam. And she said, what's the name of that pretty little round mountain over there? And they said, they ain't got no name. And she said, it looks just like a sugar loaf. And I had to Google that. They used to sell sugar in a sugar loaf that looked kind of like a big Hershey's Kiss, or it looked exactly like the Sugar Loaf Mountain does. And so Thurman and I both agree. We think Sugar Loaf got its name from Rosine. But when they started up Silco Creek, they passed about 10 houses. It was dark. Nobody wanted to fool with them. They didn't know where they was going. They just followed. People would stop and tell them, dogs barking and everything. And it's hard to think of Silco Creek being that busy, 10 houses up through there, right? And Rosine writes, said we crossed Silco Creek 27 times. She is from the Bronx and it's dark. You know, she's like a teenager, you know, but I think they probably crossed it the same as we do, 7 times, maybe, you know. Of course, now we do have the benefit what we ride was also been the railroad, you know, but she may have counted every little feeder stream and Dutch Creek and everything else, you know, but the last person they stopped, nobody'd help them, but they did give them some pine knots. They gave them a box of pine knots. So Edwin got out and walked in front of the horse with his pine knot torches to find their way across the mountains of Dutch Creek, and every time one go out, he'd light another one. These were city people too, you know, kudos to them, you know. While she was there, they stayed about 2 weeks, and she wrote this diary that after the 20th century comes on, the Cleveland Banner printed it. And Susan got into the library up here. The Banner only printed a little bit of her diary. The library's got her entire diary. It's kind of hard to read because it's in her handwriting. But we learned a lot of other stuff from there that wasn't in any of the books that we've read. And I'll tell you about one of them that's a mystery at the end that you can go find. I haven't found it yet. But they went on a hike while she stayed there. They went up today's Wolf Ridge Trail to the top of Big Frog. Jumped several grouse along the way, she said. And from the top of Big Frog, they sat down at the spring and they had lunch. And she writes about these powerful aromatic herbs that'll give you a headache. They smell so strong. It's a ramp patch, right? Still there. And she said you could see all the way from Cleveland from up there. But the one thing I learned about the spring from Rosine, she just had a little bit about it. She said she came this time of year, October. They stayed for 2 or 3 weeks in October. And she said one day it rained all day and we weren't able to go to the spring. I thought, the spring's not right beside the house somewhere. It's a pretty good ways away if the rain kept them, because that's a big deal. First thing you did in the morning back then is go and get your water for the day, right? And she also wrote about Mr. Guerin had a hut around the spring. We'd call that a spring house, right? Mm-hmm. But when we found this, because of what Thurman had told me, I thought if we ever catch a skiff of snow, if that thing's just under the ground a little bit, maybe the water will melt it. It hadn't. But what it did, we got over there looking around, we find something, we'd dig a little bit, nah, that ain't it. And Ken went up through here in a little while, and he said, hey, I found something interesting. He said, I said, what'd you find? He said, there's a bunch of water seeping out of the base of the mountain over here. And I went down there and looked, and I just looked up on the hill there about 10 or 15 feet, and I saw a flat spot. I thought, it used to have a hut around it. He's dug that out flat to build the spring house around it. So that's about where the video takes off right here. This is the last video. Hey, welcome back to the Weekly Word Outdoor Adventures. Outdoor adventures, I'm sitting indoors, but we're getting ready to take you on a really adventurous outdoor trip. This is a Weekly Word Outdoor Adventure that I guarantee you that I will remember the rest of my life. I hope you enjoy it too. How we found the lost Guerin Spring. Napoleon Guerin was the manager at the Dutch settlement, and an old mountain man had told a friend of mine, he's a generation or so, I guess maybe before him, general directions to the spring from the Guerin home place, which if you missed that one, it's been 2 or 3 weeks back on the Weekly Word, where we went to the Guerin home place that was built in 1846. And of course, 1852, I think it was, Rosine Parmenter came down from New York and spent 3 weeks there and kept a diary that the Cleveland Daily Banner back then published, so we have that record. And Rosine had written a couple things about the spring in there, and that helped us find it too. But an old mountain man had told a friend of mine decades ago about he had found that spring, and it was always stayed covered up with the leaves and the duff that covered it up over the years. But if you could find it and open it up, it's supposed to be a 2x2 gray slate rock cover on it, and underneath that, when you pick it off, was supposed to be all this hand-laid square stone that it squared out a hole in the ground and made a spring box there with a little entrance coming in, a little entrance coming out. And a friend of mine, he found this in 1996, he said. He went back in there in 2011 and he couldn't find it. And he actually said that back then that he thought it had been destroyed by the hogs. But as time went by, he realized he was looking in the wrong place, and his memory came back to him. He's 20 years or so older than I am. And he told me the same directions that mountain man had given him years ago. So it was just very general from the house. But we knew from Rosine's diary that it was probably a good ways from the house, because she wrote one day it rained all day and they weren't able to go to the spring. And we went in there with these general directions, and Ken and I started looking around, and there was snow on the ground. We had the theory that with a little skiff of snow on the ground, is about an inch or two, that maybe after 2 or 3 days, the spring box would have been warm enough to melt the snow off and we could find it that way, but it didn't work because it'd been so long since it'd been opened up. The duff was over it so high it was insulated and the snow was still there. But we got in there, looked around for about half an hour, and by the time we'd hiked all those miles in there and looked around for a half hour, it was lunchtime. We sat down on the log and had lunch. Got up and started looking again, and I silently prayed. I said, Lord, we're not going to find this thing. It's like a needle in a haystack. If we find it, you're going to have to lead us to it, and it's going to be pure grace. And after about a half an hour searching again, Ken yelled at me, and he said, I found something interesting. So I went over to where he was, and there was a place where there was no snow, about 6 by 8 wide, and what it was a seep of warm water coming out of the ground. And we looked at that for a minute, and then I looked up above it as the mountain began to rise, and about 10 feet up, I noticed it looked flat, like maybe years ago something had been dug. And then I remembered that Rosine had written in her diary back then that Mr. Napoleon Guerin had I think she called it a hut over his spring. So I thought that makes sense. It'd be a flat place, and the hut would have been over it at that time. So we scrambled up the mountain. I took my Pulaski and I began to rake off there, and the first time it hit the ground, it sounded hollow. And I began to scratch it off there, and I got down to a rock, and I pulled that rock out, and I realized it was a broken piece of that 2 by 2 piece of slate rock that was supposed to have been covering it the last time my friend had seen it. And a pine tree had fallen and hit right on it. It's probably what broke the rock in 3 pieces, but it was still intact, covering the spring under the soil. And we took the Pulaski, chopped the pine tree off, and threw it aside, and I uncovered the rest of it and started pulling the rock out, and there it was, just as pretty as it could be, just like it was 1846 again when it was laid in there, that rock by Mr. Guerin. So I'm going to take you on this adventure. I was so excited that I didn't even take time to get mic'd up, so the audio's not all that great, but I think you can still pick up all the excitement and adrenaline while we're uncovering this spring, and we actually get the camera and get some shots down inside of it for you too. So take a look at this, and I hope you enjoy it.
Now I'll probably have to get my phone out and read the video. Across the ford, to the right in the flat area.
All right, we've been on a mission to see if we could find the Guerin Spring that hasn't been uncovered in decades, that Mr. Guerin would have put rocks down in it, and according to Rosine Parmenter's diary in the 1850s, there was a hut built over it. We're out here in the snow, and we found a flat area, and down below a little bit, it's a little bit of a seep. So we started probing and digging around a little bit here, and we uncovered this big flat rock that we've been told it was covered with a flat rock. That may just be part of it. I see another one standing on its end. That could have been all one rock at one time. About 2 by 2 is what I'd seen. And down in here you can see the rock, I believe hand laid in there. About a 4 by 4 entry of water coming in, and a 4 by 4 that they left going out. This big tree's falling right over the top of it, and that may be what broke the rock in half, because when I uncovered the leaves, there's like 2 pieces of it. It's supposed to be a 2 by 2 rock covering it up, and one of them was still up here and the other one's down in there on its side. But I'm gonna see if I can drag this tree back, and we'll see if we can get the camera and get some footage down inside the spring box here. All right.
Oh, you got that through that heartwood. There you go. Oh, it's in the stacked in rock around the.
Let's see from there's the rest of the rock.
Wow. How about that?
2 by 2 is pretty close.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's got a good flow in there.
Clean that little stuff I knocked in here. That's enough to pull out.
Yeah.
And down in here you can see the rock, I believe hand laid in there, about a 4 by 4 entry of water coming in and a 4 by 4 that they left going out. I'm drunk out of the gear and spring.
Yeah, you have, haven't you?
Mossy side.
Here's a bigger one too. Yeah, how about that?
All right, I hope you enjoyed that and hope you could pick up all the excitement and pleasure that we had when I was uncovering that. It was just like adrenaline was sky high for me. And I hope you picked it up because I really can't describe the joy that I had in finding that lost spring. And of course, when we got done with it, we closed everything back up and covered everything back up where it can sleep for a few more decades now. But I got to thinking about that later, how just an overwhelming joy I found of finding that which had been lost for all these years. And I thought, I wonder if the Lord had as much joy when he found me when I was lost, because the Bible says, you know, there's joy in the presence of the angels in heaven over one sinner that gets saved. Not necessarily the angels are rejoicing, although I'm sure they are too, but I know the redeemed are because they know what it's like to be lost. But I know the Lord has pleasure in those that come to him and trust in him too. And he'll have that same kind of pleasure, and all of heaven will. If you're lost and you just come to the Lord and say, Lord, here I am. I'm trusting in you. Forgive me for all my sins and help me to follow you. And there'll be joy in heaven, but you'll find out there'll be that kind of joy in your heart too, and peace, knowing that you belong to God and that you're forgiven. See you next week on the Weekly Word. All right, one more thing. Here's a mystery that some of y'all might want to go and solve. I'm getting too old. I was reading Rosine's diary, going over it again today, and she talks about Mr. Guerin when they were staying with him. She said, he still works like a young man, but she called him old Mr. Guerin. And she finally said, well, he's 62 years old. Well, that's a year younger than me, you know. but old Mr. Guerin, you know, she was a teenager, you know, from Brooklyn, you know, but she writes in her diary about another mysterious thing just below the Guerin house somewhere that Thurman's never found, and he's looked, and I want to get in there this winter if I can get back in there and look again, about a rock that's most unusual. She says the most interesting thing she saw on her trip. It was a rock. I don't remember if she gave the dimensions or not, but it has to be pretty big or he would have brought it back to the house. He took them, Mr. Guerin took it and showed them to him on one of their trips. And by reading her diary, they had been down to Laurel Branch, which is not far below the Guerin place there. And on their way back from Laurel Branch, She said, there's this most interesting rock that's halfway engulfed with lava, like it just flowed over. And that's not like our rocks. Although when I was a kid and we were camping on Cityco, I picked up a rock. I don't know if it's still in Mom and Daddy's basement or not, about as big as my fist, and it had fingers of lava over it. That's unusual around here. I don't know where it came from. But this one couldn't be that little, or he would have brought it to the house to show people. So it's probably some big rock maybe sticking out of the ground that's still out there in the woods somewhere. That's, yeah, maybe next year I can show you that video. But I'd like to get in there and find that. But the most interesting thing she saw on her trip was that lava rock, she said, and all the different stuff she did. But all right, any questions? Like I said, the Gearin place, isn't that beautiful in the bottom of that spring? The Gearin place is a half mile below the rest of the Dutch settlement. When we came down out of Pace Gap that day, we passed a couple of rocky places that we thought was them, and I'm pretty sure now that I've seen the others that was like the Knockerinis. There's two described down from Pace Gap between there and the Dutch fields. And when you're coming in off 221, the way they bring the tractors today, when you get to that big field, Linda's probably rode it, before you get to Dutch Creek, there's a big briery field that they mow. Back in the back corner of that field was supposed to have been the Littner place, the first one. I think the Weaver was one you come to, and then the Littner. Then you cross the creek, and the Beckler place is the most known. Anybody know Ray Beckler here in Cleveland? He's a friend of mine. He's in his upper 80s. He's a Gideon. He comes speaks at the church every once in a while. But Ray's brother was born in that Beckler cabin, his older brother. But I asked Ray about it, and he said, by the time I come along, said Mom and Daddy had done moved out. There's several generations of the Becklers stayed there, but said by the time I come along, Mom and Daddy had done moved out of there, and we lived in that house that you see from the horse trail today down at the mouth of Silco Creek when you're riding by. Yeah, where the chimney's still standing. That's where Ray Beckler was born, in that one there. So.
Isn't that the Beckler Cemetery that's over there?
There is a Beckler Cemetery over there, yep, near the church camp on the other side over there.
And then what's the cemetery there near the Silco Horse Trail?
Well, that's there's who'd you say was buried there?
Ledford was buried there.
Well, there's a Ledford, but there's two different names. The oldest name's a Kerbo Cemetery, but then there's some of them call it something else today. Arthur Cemetery, yep. Which that was Silco Campground, and all that area was one of the Arthur's farm. Not Van Arthur, he was on up toward the mountain, but that was the Arthur farm. Which, by the way, that's another story. But if you go to Silco Campground and walk across the road toward the creek and walk down the creek, y'all know what's down through there, right? There's all kinds of building foundations from the CCC camp that was there. If you watch one of the guys on YouTube and stuff like me, he's walking around in that CCC camp showing all those old foundations. He thinks he's in the Dutch settlement. It is a mysterious thing because everybody in Polk County has heard about the Dutch settlement. You know, but hardly anybody knows where it was anymore.
Well, now, isn't there a spot that's round? Remember, Linda, where we used to, it's round, dug hole, big, about maybe 30 feet across?
In the CCC camp?
No, it's up in the settlement.
I don't know. They maybe.
Jump the horses over the log.
I remember where all those rocks were in one of those fields.
Yeah.
You all probably did you ever ride horses? I probably already asked you. You rode Jeeps. Did you ever ride horses from the Silco Trail all the way to Pace Gap?
Oh yeah, we still do.
Oh,
We start going up the old Jeep road. We're right parallel to you to the north. It actually goes off of our horse trail. The way
I started to say once you get to the Gearin place now, I don't think you could ride a horse to the settlement. It's grown up with rodeos so much, but I know Henry White and Howard Deverell, they said they used to ride that, but you came out in Pace Gap probably if you went all the way through.
all the way through it came out.
Can you still do that? It's pretty rough, but that's the old Dietz Road.
And we know how to get from Pace Gap down to Big Creek all the way down out to Highway 64 too, by horse.
I wonder if that's the other part of the Dietz Road that was parallel to what we drive now.
It's gone and put in so many logging roads that, we wound up using part of the.
The Deach Road, I read he had built bridges across Pace Gap or Pace Branch several times down through there. So that might be what you're riding now. I don't know, but that's a long time ago. You know, it's just amazing to me somebody come in there and build a road like that. But
Was it a commune?
well,
I understood it was.
that's kind of, there was a book that came out, one of the first books, and Thurman's debunked most of it. It was like written by somebody that had never even been there. They were in Polk County, but they were passing along the stuff they heard, like elaborate swinging bridges between the mountain tops and stuff like this, you know. And Thurman made a very good point. He said, I don't think they even had a swinging bridge across the creek, you know. They had plenty of wood, and rope was a special thing back then. And if you've been up in there, Dutch Creek up in there's a branch, you know, it's 6 inches deep most of the time. So, you know, they used, the original ford was 200 feet above the one we're using now from the 221 side, and it's not conducive really for building bridges. You just go through the creek. And they may have had a footbridge or something, you know, to keep their feet from getting wet. But the croquet things, I think, was true. And the vineyards, they said when the Forest Service bought it in 1939, the vineyards were still there, the cultivated vineyards. And there was stories in that book about how they made wine and exported it. And according to Thurman, he says they probably exported a bottle or two as far as Cleveland. But they were Italians, so that's what they did, you know. They made wine, and it was sort of, I don't think that was the intention to be it sometimes said it was a socialistic commune, but it was just mountain people that lived together and was probably had the purpose of finding something for Edwin Bear. We've got to get out and find this gold ore and the stuff, you know, like.
But when you said the Dutch settlement, I was thinking Dutch like Holland Dutch.
Yeah, that's a Polk County term for the Deutsch, who were Germans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not pronounced really Dutch.
it's Deutsch, I think. I've never been to Germany. Is that right, Deutsch? You've been over there. But they were referring to the Germans. But there were several different nationalities there. But I don't think their purpose was they came to set up a socialistic, what do they call it, utopian society. Once they got here, they were just like the Americans on the other side. They were just mountain people trying to eke a living out of the land, and they were doing a little exploring while they were here. And they were all Roman Catholics to start with, but I've read by the second or third generation they were all Protestants. Because there ain't nothing else up there, you know. If you're going to go to church, it's the Baptist church down the holler somewhere, you know.
So that thing is still active, the water?
Oh yeah, I drink out of it.
Yeah.
Don't it look good?
Yeah, good and clear.
It's beautiful.
It is pretty. Who would have thought?
The other thing near the spring is there's 4 or 5, Thurman's got them marked there where he thinks they were. He said he only really ever found one, but I think I found one that day. They had what they call block houses, which were just some little old small temporary housing for anybody who was going to come and build later in the settlement. They could stay there for a while. And while we were eating lunch, I looked up on the ridge there, and about 15 feet up there, like the ridge is going like this, and all of a sudden there's a flat place. And I walked up there, and it's like 8 by 10. I could see a blockhouse being right here, and it was right in view of his porch, where his porch would have been. So that was probably one of them. But I guess the key point as you get to studying about that is just to keep in mind that they weren't nearly as isolated as it is now there. The lake really isolated all that. At one time, I think Thurman says, between the mouth of Silco Creek, which had a big store right there, and there was another store where we parked the horse trailers on the other side of the road in that curve right there. And there was like 75 houses from the mouth of Silco Creek to Jack's River. And a school, you know, between the campground and where we parked was the Blue Ridge School and a church. You know, it wasn't like now, you know.
Is it called Alacusi?
That's another place down there somewhere down around Jack's River, I think. We found the ruins of the school. We did a video on that one too. It's not far. You can throw a rock from the halfway between Silco Campground and where we parked the horse trailers. There's a place, if you get off in the woods there below the CCC camp, you'll find the remains of the old school, the stone steps and stuff there, that there were still people going to school there till 1940 or so,
1940.
which is, what, 85 years ago now.
They blocked off that property. The Forest Service just bought some of that back from Polk County. You know, we used to ride in there, and there was a section that didn't belong to the National Forest. It does now.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
And it was some kind of acreage that they had, the same as up there on.
The school property?
Yeah.
Okay, when they sold off the land, they left a township with so many square acres for a school everywhere. So yeah, the Teleco trade got hold of some of that and did something after a time, but
That just, like I said, in the last 10 years, has finally gone back to the forest.
okay, I didn't even know about that one in Silco.
Higgins's property.
Makes sense. The maps they drew off when they were selling the land, they left a township, they call it, for
They
school.
go in there every so many years and mark the boundaries of that property. And we ride horses through there and think, what are they marking in here? I didn't
In case they ever want to build a school, I guess.
It was the acreage that was blocked off that belonged.
It belonged to Polk County instead of Cherokee National Forest, yep.
to the Cherokee National Forest.
I guess they decided they never were going to build any schools on it, so the counties have sold them to the Forest Service now. All right, any other questions?
I bet it was more than 3 cents an acre.
Yep. I'd like to have bought a lot of that, wouldn't you? 3 cents an acre.
Well, thank you, Tazz.
My pleasure, my pleasure.